What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the extended cut, minimally edited podcast version of today's episode. Thank you so much for being here. When I first started releasing podcast episodes, it was very unintentional. I just didn't edit my video down into its final version and then made that into a podcast. And now I find myself spending quite a bit more time thinking about this when I script the episode. Like, what am I going to put in the podcast version of the episode? And I just love that I can insert so much more nuance, anecdotes, just side quests really into these episodes. So if you enjoy listening to them, I enjoy having you here. Thank you. I appreciate you. Today we're going to try to tackle the question, what to do if you feel bored in session with the client. It is a very common experience. I would argue a universal experience. Even if you love your job and most of the time you're not bored, at some point you're going to get bored in session eventually. It's just part of being a person. And for some folks, they might be feeling bored often, and some folks might be feeling bored most of the time. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about all the reasons, at least all the ones I could think of, for why a therapist might be getting bored in session with a client. And I'll offer some tips, some solutions, things to try so that hopefully you can feel equipped to figure out why you're feeling so bored and what to do about it. Now, before I get into some of those reasons why a therapist might feel bored with their clients, I want to address a couple things first. First of all, an earlier version of Marie used to think that if I ever felt bored for even a second of a therapy session, that I was somehow failing as a therapist. I was doing something wrong. I would try to just sort of like snap myself out of it and say like, you can't be bored. So if you're prone to this sort of self-judgment when you feel bored, like I used to be prone to, let me encourage you to shift your boredom as just a little flag. Like, it's not to be ignored. We definitely want to take a closer look at it, but it's not a reason to judge yourself. Your boredom is signaling something, and it's more helpful to be curious about it. It feels very similar to the episode that I did a little while back on countertransference, that, rather than judging the presence of the countertransference, we just take it as an interesting data point and put it under the microscope. Look at it curiously to say, this is telling us something. Let's get to know it a little better. So I encourage you to take that curiosity with you and leave the judgment at the door as we dive into some reasons why a therapist might get bored during session. Now, sometimes when we get bored in session, it's something about us that's going on. Sometimes when we get bored in session, it's something about whatever's happening with our client that's going on. And sometimes it's some mixture of both. So I like to make sure I ask about both of those things. First, let's take a look at some of the things that we bring to the table that could be contributing to the boredom. And I'd start by asking about your physical care. Like, think about things like your sleep and your circadian rhythm. Are you seeing clients like right during that afternoon lull when your body kind of wants a nap? Or are you regularly only getting 5 hours of sleep per night? Think about that. I'd also ask questions about how much you're putting your body through in your work day and your work week. Like, how many clients are you seeing per week? How many clients are you seeing per day? How many clients are you seeing back to back? Are your breaks sufficient throughout your week and throughout your days in order to sustain your energy levels? And I mean, you could break this down all the way into like, what are you eating and all these things that, sometimes we're just bored because our body is like, I need a nap and I need some good food, and I'm on my fourth client in a row, and that's just a lot. There could be kind of nuanced things about yourself that apply as well. Like for me personally, I can see way more people back to back in person than I can see virtually. There's something about staring at the computer screen that just takes it out of me. So I actually cap it at 2 therapy clients back to back when I'm seeing them virtually, when I could see maybe 3 clients back to back when I'm seeing them in person. So just kind of take things like that into account. Get to know yourself and what your capacity is. Another reason therapists could get bored is because of countertransference. Like, is this not the Captain Obvious answer that I think most people would give of like, oh no, there's something going on with me. Personally, I am exuding some reaction to this person because maybe they remind me of somebody else or that sort of thing. And though I don't think the majority of reasons why a therapist gets bored is because of countertransference, it is certainly worth evaluating, and definitely sometimes it really is a countertransference. If you're ever unsure about whether countertransference might be at play when you feel bored, this is definitely a great opportunity to consult with a trusted colleague. And that's going to be a theme that pops up over and over in this episode. generally consulting with other therapists when you're stuck, especially if you feel bored, is a good idea. Another potential reason why you might be bored is if you kind of lost the plot. Sometimes therapy can get a bit stagnant. We sort of lose track of what a client's treatment goals are, and then therapy sessions kind of lose their sense of direction because we're not even totally sure where it is that we're going. So if this has happened for you with your client, then I definitely go back, revisit their treatment plan, check in, like, is this the treatment plan that I've been working on with this client? Maybe you just need to kind of regroup your direction and come back to that plan. And if it seems like the treatment plan needs some adjusting, then definitely bring it up with your client, make any tweaks that you want to so that you feel like you have an achievable treatment plan that you can keep working towards. Okay, so far we've been talking mostly about things that might be going on within ourselves or our approach with our clients. Now let's talk about some of the client-related reasons why we might be getting bored. One reason we can get bored because of our clients is if they're not telling us the whole story, or maybe they're focusing a lot of their energy on some sort of side tangent rather than kind of the core of what's really happening or what you decided to focus on together. And I've been there before. I know when this happens, the temptation is to either just kind of stick with whatever they're bringing up and kind of dive into it as though it needs to become the focus, or we might enter a power struggle and try to strong arm them into focusing on the thing that we really wanted to focus on, right? But one thing I've noticed, at least for me, the sooner I can bring this up and notice it out loud with the client, the better. Of course, not only for my own boredom, but ultimately for their own care as well, because we might be focusing on something that's not really what they were looking for help with. And if we can just notice out loud that that seems to keep happening, what should we do about that, or what's really going on here? Then you can address whatever's keeping that from being the kind of front and center topic that you look at. Another reason we can get bored is, especially with long-term clients, we can see them loop through the same cycle and pattern over and over again. One example of this dynamic that I see often is when somebody says they want to end a relationship with a partner or even just a family member or loved one, and then they continue to just keep going back over and over, and it kind of seems like you're just looping through the same treatment plan every time they cycle back through it again. I think probably the best solution for this is to bring it up with your client when you see that the loop is happening and reassess if you need to change your approach. You might say something to your client like, hey, you came in to work on this, and I'm noticing we've been working on it for a little while, and this issue seems to keep cycling for you or keep coming up for you, or it's difficult to implement. And so I'm wondering if maybe it might make sense for us to shift our approach here. Can we take a closer look at what we've been doing so far so we can kind of pinpoint what we might be missing so that we can make adjustments accordingly? You can see that ultimately the goal is to help your client arrive at their treatment goals rather than trying to just not feel bored. But the boredom plays a very key role in sort of flagging like, hey, something here isn't quite right. So my system's just kind of shutting down because why am I even here? And it's helpful to listen to that and follow its guidance so that you can ultimately help your client. Kind of in a similar vein, another reason why we might get bored is we have clients who like to perseverate on telling the same story over and over and over and over. Of course, at face value, this seems totally unproductive. Why are we telling the same story for the 5th time? And our brain responds by shutting down, which starts to present as boredom or even getting sleepy. When this happens with clients, I find it most helpful to check in on what might be going on that they're telling this story again and again. And there's ways to ask it that sound genuinely curious rather than judgmental. You could say something like, hey, I've noticed that's actually not the first time you shared that story. I've heard it a few times now, so that tells me there's something important going on with that story that it's sticking in your mind. Can you tell me more about, what's going on for you when you end up sharing the story again? There could be something about that story for them that feels unresolved. There's something that's sort of stuck or trapped within the story that's wanting to get sorted through a bit. Or maybe there's something about telling the story that in the moment of telling the story, it offers them some benefit. They're upset at somebody they care about, and rehashing this upsetting story kind of validates their anger. They feel like, the way they're responding makes sense. Or, it might have some sort of secondary gain, so to speak, by retelling the story other than just like I'm telling my therapist what happened. It's really helpful to understand what that is and see if something's wanting to be addressed within it. And of course, another reason why we can become bored in session is because our clients aren't really connected to themselves, and therefore they're disconnected from whatever they're talking about. So that creates this natural kind of parallel process where your client is kind of like, yeah, I'm not really here right now. And your body responds with boredom, which is like saying, I'm not really here right now either. Sometimes our client is disconnected from themselves because there's something about the context, the topic, that is kind of dissociative in nature, particularly if there's some kind of trauma or something like that they're focusing on, and then they disconnect as a way of coping. And for some clients, that disconnection is more pervasive. They're kind of disconnected from themselves all the time. We could see that playing out with something like a mood disorder, where as long as they're in the midst of a depressive episode, they're in enough of a fog that they can't even quite see themselves totally clearly. Or it could play out with something like a personality disorder, where kind of by definition, they're not really themselves. Their entire persona is sort of coping with whatever. We could trail off on where the personality disorders start from, and I'm sure there could be a debate in the comments section. So I'm not even going to try to open that can of worms today. So a lot of these examples I've named so far about reasons why we might be getting bored in session are kind of specific to a particular moment. Maybe it's something that this client is bringing, or, we just don't operate great at 2 p.m. because our body is trying to nap and we get bored, or these sort of very acute moments. But for some folks, we're feeling bored kind of a lot, like kind of all the time. In which case, I think we might want to take a different approach. But before we dive into that, I'd like to thank Powbox for sponsoring this episode. When I first learned that signing a BAA with Google Workspace alone wasn't enough to ensure that your client emails were HIPAA secure, I signed up for Powbox. It's been a little over a year since then, and it's so simple to use, I almost forget that it's even there. It's like my own little personal elf working behind the scenes, encrypting all my emails. Rather than require your clients to log into a portal or enter a password in order to securely receive messages from you, you can just message each other straight from your regular email inbox. Powbox integrates on the back end of your email provider and is completely invisible except for the Secured by Powbox badge at the bottom of your emails. Just follow a few simple steps to get it set up, and if you need help, Powbox's customer support consistently receives amazing reviews. If you'd like to check out Powbox, they offer a 14-day free trial to all users, and for the first 100 people who mention my name at sign up, you'll get an extra $250 off your first year. Just head to powbox.com and enter Marie Fang in the box that asks how you heard about them. That's Powbox, spelled Paubox.com. Thank you again to Powbox for sponsoring this episode, and now back to what to do if you have a more pervasive experience of boredom. If you're in the situation where you're feeling bored most of the time, or even all the time that you're meeting with your therapy clients, then I think it's a good time to evaluate whether there might be some career-related reasons behind your boredom. Now, please don't take that to mean that I think anyone who's bored often with their clients should quit being a therapist. That is not what I mean at all. There may be a select few people for whom, maybe this career isn't the best fit, but I don't think that's necessarily what's true for everybody. But as I talk with therapists, I do observe that it's quite common for folks to just be working in a particular context that isn't the best fit for them, when maybe a different context would work much better, even still with doing therapy work. So if you're feeling bored most of the time or all the time, I would just really do a deep dive evaluation of your current career setup. Is there anything about your current workplace, your current population, your current theoretical orientation, your current approach, anything about your workplace, wherever you might be working, whether you work for somebody else, you're in private practice, and anything in between, just to see what could be contributing to your boredom. And then to get to the bottom of things, try asking the magic wand question, where we might say, yeah, if you had the power to change everything that you wanted to change, what changes would make you feel happier or less bored or make this fit better for you? For some people, it might be, I really, really want to work with teens, but I've been working with adults and couples this whole time. But whenever I do get a teen on my caseload, I love it so much. So it could be something about the population that you work with, or maybe it's something about your setting. Maybe you're in an inpatient setting and you would do better outpatient, or maybe you're outpatient, you do better inpatient. So honestly, the list of reasons of what could be going on with your career that might not be the best fit could be any number of reasons. So I encourage you to really evaluate and see, is my current career setup working for me? And do I want to try making any changes to move the needle in a more interesting direction for me? I can definitely pull a personal example of this where for the first number of years as a therapist, I focused primarily on treating anxiety. Anxiety is the reason why I got into this profession because I had my own anxiety disorder as a teen, and I loved applying CBT to anxiety, and it just felt so magical to just watch people's symptoms completely go away within a very reasonable amount of time. It just felt like magic. And after doing that for a certain number of years, I noticed myself starting to get less and less interested, more and more bored. Here we're going to do systematic desensitization again. Here we're going to do some exposure and response prevention for your OCD. Like it was just mechanical for me at some point. And I still kind of liked doing it, but I definitely was getting more bored with it and just getting more and more interested in working with different types of presenting issues and not as excited when I had somebody calling in about anxiety. So eventually I just pivoted. I completely took anxiety off the list of my specialties on my website where I was advertising myself and just focusing on something totally different. And what happened was I started to enjoy the work a lot more. And now I've taken enough space away from treating anxiety over and over and over again that if from time to time I have somebody come through with kind of a very kind of classic anxiety disorder that, merits some CBT treatment, it kind of feels fun. Like, all right, I know how to do this. And I enjoy it still in kind of more modest amounts. But if I was still doing systematic desensitization for panic disorder day in and day out, now that I'm however many years into this profession, I do think I'd be pretty bored right now. And the beautiful thing about this profession is there's so many different presenting issues that I don't think I'm ever going to be bored forever because I do just kind of keep gently pivoting little by little over time that I'm sure I'm going to be doing something totally different 10 years from now and then again 20 years from now until, whenever I'm done doing this work. I hope I get to do it forever. Now, certainly this is not an exhaustive list of every single reason why a therapist might feel bored in session. Certainly it's some of the more common ones that I've experienced myself or witnessed in other therapists. Hopefully this is enough to kind of get the ball rolling, your juices flowing, so you can really start to think about why you might be feeling bored in session. So if you are feeling bored with clients, here's a kind of like triage process to go through when it happens so that you don't necessarily need to like pull the alarm bell the first time you ever feel bored, but you can kind of scale it up appropriately as it starts becoming a bigger and bigger thing. I don't know what y'all are going to think about this, but for me, if I get bored just one time with a particular client, I kind of give myself a free pass. Like, okay, I just got bored one time. This is the first time this has ever happened with this client, and I'm human. It happens. I'm going to come back now and let's see if I have issues staying focused and attending to my client's needs. Could be that was the night that your baby kept you up. I've been there. Or maybe you just booked one too many sessions that week. You're trying to squeeze them in, and so something had to give somewhere. No need to like fully dissect the moment you feel bored. Just notice it and say, okay, I'm going to give myself a free pass, but we'll keep our eyes open to see if this keeps happening. If you notice that the boredom comes up twice in one session or maybe in back-to-back sessions with the same client, then I would check in, like just a little silent internal check-in. Like, I got bored twice back to back with this client. I wonder what could be going on there. Could there be anything that's right in front of me right now that I can see that's contributing to that boredom? If you do catch something that's more personal to you, like your sleep patterns, your eating patterns, or just like you were going through a really hard week that week, if you can, make any adjustments that are within your reasonable power and then see if that makes changes for the next time. If you're not able to catch anything going on personally contributing to things, or you see personal things that maybe aren't really in your perceived power to control that might be contributing, that's a good time to check in with colleagues. Like, here we are. I'm getting bored with my clients. Either I have no idea why, Or I think it might be something going on personally that I don't really have much power over, so I could do with some help consulting. If in that process you're not finding anything particularly personally related contributing to your boredom, then it could be a good time to bring it up with your clients, especially if now it's coming up not just twice, but like repeatedly. It's a pattern that you're feeling bored. You don't need to say, "Hey client, I'm feeling real bored during our sessions. What's your problem?" Never. But there's ways to bring it up in a much more compassionate and curious way. Like, "Hey, I've noticed ever since, we started addressing this topic, there's some moments in session where it's a little bit harder to connect with what you're bringing up. Like, are you noticing that too? Is that just me? Maybe I'm missing something," right? And so you can kind of create as many pathways for your client to essentially kind of loop you in, to essentially say like, "I think I might be missing something. Is there anything you're seeing? Are you feeling the same way? Can you catch me up to speed if I did miss something?" So there's plenty of opportunities for compassion and grace rather than like, "I'm feeling bored." Fix it, client. Definitely probably using the word boredom is not going to be helpful for most clients, but it could be something like, "I'm realizing I'm having a lot of trouble connecting the dots with some of the things, or I'm having trouble connecting to some of the things you're bringing up. I wonder if there's something I'm missing there," rather than saying, "I'm feeling bored." And whatever you do, I strongly urge you not to let the boredom build up. So my triage doesn't go much further past like being bored, a few times in a row with a client, because hopefully by then you've started consulting, you've started troubleshooting, you've done what's within your reasonable power to address the boredom. And if you do all of those things and you're still feeling bored, then it is really important to be open to a much bigger pivot. I guess you could ask the question of whether you can still deliver effective therapy while bored. I'm not going to tackle that one in this episode. I'll say for me, personally, just as Marie, I'm going to have a really hard time offering my best therapy if I'm bored. Like, that's just a true statement for me. It's when I'm really engaged with my client that I'm helpful. Even if I'm frustrated or angry or annoyed, I'm still engaged, but bored is kind of like missing something. So I'm just not even totally here right now, and my clients need me to be here. So yeah, if you're still continuously bored with a client, then I start to at least flag a concern about whether you're the best fit for them or if you're truly helping them as much as they deserve. And perhaps referring to somebody else would be much more effective. Of course, if the solution is for you to pivot into some sort of different career path as a therapist, or perhaps totally out of the field, then hopefully you're also taking steps towards understanding that better and making movements in that direction as well. But if you can, try to catch and address that boredom relatively early on. Small changes early on are much easier to make than big changes later on where you have to like significantly course correct because you just stayed on this one path for so long. And my last tip for those who can access it, if you're feeling bored, not just with one client, but like some boredom in general with your work, it's never a bad idea to take a break if you can access it. Take a vacation, take a week off. You don't even have to travel anywhere. Just take some time off from seeing your therapy clients. See how it feels to have that time off, and then see how it feels to come back. Are you dreading coming back? Are you bored still when you see your clients after coming back? That's really helpful information. And to me, that would start flagging to check for things like burnout or the beginnings of burnout, which can happen if we don't address some of our needs and we kind of keep pushing through when our body is saying we're seeing too many clients or this isn't working for us, and we keep pushing anyway. It's going to eventually lead to burnout. And so that is something I would definitely check for if that's happening. But for some folks, you take the vacation, you take the time away from clients, you come back and you feel great. And that just means you probably just needed a vacation because you're a person. People need vacations. Well, I hope you found this helpful. Whenever I make a list of things in an episode, I always feel self-conscious knowing I did not cover everything on the list as much as I tried. So feel free to add to the list in the comments below of reasons why you've noticed for why you might feel bored, and if there's any potential ways to address it in a healthy way. Well, thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you're feeling bored, whether sometimes or all the time in sessions, then I hope this helps you feel supported, and also that you feel like you can release any judgment you might have on yourself for it. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.